you sit on a lot of different committees when you're a city council member, various regional committees. And I started seeing that the board members didn't know their roles and responsibilities. They had no clue what they were supposed to be doing, and they certainly didn't do it. They exercised no oversight. They didn't participate in the vision of the agencies. And not only that, but they were wide open for corruption.
Welcome to the Jennifer J. Hammond Podcast. Jennifer is a licensed realtor, educator, speaker, and best-selling author. Jennifer's goal is to help you find your yay in every day.
Hello. This is Jennifer J. Hammond. And I'm so excited. As you know, I love to talk real estate, anything real estate. How can you make good decisions in real estate? But also, how can you have the right education, the right inspiration? Well, our next guest, former mayor, tells audiences how to hold local governments accountable. And as real estate agents, we need to do that. But even just every one of us, we need to do that. So Debbie Peterson, she's a local government expert, boy, but she's the former mayor and councilman, or the council member, planning commissioner, and an advocate for good government. And of course, she likes to tell it like it is, which just doesn't happen that much in politics, I just have to say. So I am so excited to have you. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. I can't wait to talk to you because you are qualified in a way that most of us aren't. So I'm very eager to hear your story too about being on Capitol Hill, and I guess you're still near Capitol Hill.
It's funny. It's been 25 years in real estate in Washington, D.C., which is amazing because when I think about it, I was just in my 20s. So here's my quick story, which I don't know if I've ever said on my own show, my own story, because I'm always sharing everybody else's stories. But I went from getting a bachelor's degree in legal administration and then a master's degree in public administration down in Florida. And then I went up to Washington, D.C. because I was recruited by a congressman to leave my safe little wonderful Florida to come up into the big city of Washington, D.C. And I worked for him and I absolutely hated it. And partly when I had gone to work for him, I thought, well, I can make a difference. I can help, there ought to be a law. And I would go speak to organizations. And on the state level, I had worked on the state level, I should say, for a year before I left. I worked for a state senator and a state representative. And I had been able to do that. I had gone to speak to organizations and then I'd come back. We need to write a law to protect the mangroves, or we need to write a law that helps protect homeowners. And I got to help with that. And then I got to watch it, get through the House and the Senate in Florida. Then I went to Washington, D.C. Not the same experience. And I realized very quickly that I wasn't really going to be able to make a difference. I was just a cog in the wheel. And quite frankly, I was so young, nobody would listen to me. And quite frankly, I was a woman. And so now this is 25, 26 years ago when this was happening. So it was even more, I was just going to say, it was prejudice against women and women being knowledgeable. So I knew that I was going to have to go out into the workforce and go and become more knowledgeable. And I remember walking across the street to the Library of Congress and sitting there with tears in my eyes, talking to the librarian in the reading room. This had this beautiful gold dome room ceiling in there. And I remember saying, I don't know what to do. I have a master's degree in public administration. And I thought I would be in government for the rest of my life. And, I had worked in it a little bit from Florida to up in Congress. And I said, but I'm not doing anything that's making a difference. And I realized also that to be, in a lot of ways, you needed to be elected to actually really make a difference on the national level. And I don't feel that way totally, but from when I was a 20-something-year-old and I just didn't know, I felt like that was all I could do, was that someday maybe I would run and I would be able to help, or I'd make a whole bunch of money and I'd be able to influence by putting money. It seemed like that was the only thing I could do. And it's funny because over the years, I have been up on Capitol Hill lobbying all sorts of real estate issues, tax benefits, banking regulations, real estate benefits that, for first-time home buyers or for the elderly or for veterans, all that kind of stuff. And so I have learned that you can be effective. One squeaky wheel can really be effective. But anyway, so I digress. so then I've been in real estate, that librarian. We sat and looked over all these different careers. And with that librarian at the Library of Congress, I decided real estate. I've always wanted to be in real estate. So then I did a whole new career.
Oh, that's a great story. Wow. Well, I went into real estate sort of for a different reason. I did it because I had a 2-year-old son and I wanted and my mother had a real estate license, but she was more of this back person and I was the front person. So I thought, what fun. I'll go into business with my mother. And so we were always a team. So
wow.
and I love teamwork. So I did it for a completely different reason, but it worked out well for me as well.
Wow. Well, that's really special though, to be able to do that with your mother. So, but also you got to tell us, so you're the former mayor of, it's Grover Beach, California, right?
Yes, it's a little town on the beach on Highway 1, famous Highway 1 in California. And nobody's really ever heard of it. There are only about 13,000 of us. We have a train station and I call it Kansas at the beach. It's a really friendly, unpretentious little town. It's probably polar opposite from DC, I would think.
I mean, like going from Florida. I mean, I grew up in Key West, Florida. And so going from, the small little island of Key West all the way up to Washington, DC. And it was a rude awakening.
It's culture shock. I think it really is culture shock. Yeah, definitely.
So you helped fight corruption. So tell us your story.
Well, I started because I had a young son. People wanted me to go into local government, elected office. And so I started on the planning commission and I did that for 4 years. And I was the chair for 2 years. And then I ran for city council and won a seat on the city council, and then ran for mayor and was the first directly elected female mayor in my town.
Wow.
But while I was on the city council, I started seeing things. I started seeing you sit on a lot of different committees when you're a city council member, various regional committees. And I started seeing that the board members didn't know their roles and responsibilities. They had no clue what they were supposed to be doing, and they certainly didn't do it. They exercised no oversight. They didn't participate in the vision of the agencies. And not only that, but they were wide open for corruption, just wide open. And that was about 4 out of 16. But at that point, and I'd been a businesswoman all my life, and I could read profit and loss statements and budgets. And so I, at that point, I didn't really identify it as corruption, but I had someone approach me to tell me that there were really serious problems in our sewer district, and I'd better get on top of it. And I tried. Okay. I tried, but it was controlled by the existing mayor. And It took me 4 years until I became mayor to do something about it. And in the end, the administrator was charged with felony and misdemeanor, several felonies and misdemeanors for conflict of interest, for self-dealing, and eventually was charged. It got off with misdemeanors, did a plea bargain, but so that was one. And then I would also observe a lot of times that they wouldn't follow the sunshine laws. And for people who don't know what sunshine laws are, those are the laws that protect the public. They ensure that everything is done out in the open, that there aren't secret meetings. And I was finding a lot of secret meetings. So I did a lot of work on that as well. And to the point of having to stand up in closed meetings and say, this is illegal. And if you continue, I will leave. And when I leave, I will say why I left. And then, of course, they would behave.
Yeah.
So I never had to leave.
Wow. Well, I think it's amazing that you were brave enough to also stand up to it, because I know that it takes a lot to be able to stand up to that. And I think that maybe that's a great transition for us into one of the things that I said to you when I first met you was, I would love for you to talk a little bit to real estate agents on how, and even just people who are homeowners who feel like there's nothing that can be done about it, that they can't get involved. And even as I described with my story, when I was 20 something, I felt like nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to ever listen to me. I mean, I actually had a few elected officials say that to me. And I think that's part of the reason they said, so, you are one of the least effective age groups who you just don't vote. You're not basically your voice doesn't matter because I was a woman, because I was young. I mean, there was just all sorts of reasons. And I heard that literally from congresswomen and congressmen. And it was so disheartening that that's one of the reasons that I jumped out of it and got into real estate. Not that I still throughout my years have dabbled back into it, especially when I get passionate about something. But what kind of tips and techniques and things would you say to real estate agents and to the average person? How do you get involved in local politics and make the world a better place?
I think the first thing, and I think it's really important, is to recognize that local politics, and correct me if I'm wrong, you are the expert on this, but that local politics are not political. So it's not actually in my view, you don't get involved in local politics, particularly as a realtor, because you're representing clients of all kinds of politics in most cases. What you're doing is you're representing your community, and it is meant to be a nonpartisan thing, because generally community problems are things that can be solved between one another without having to go to any kind of political party. And very often we would see people of completely different factions voting absolutely the same way. And I think that's how it should be. I think that was the original intent. That would be a government of the people, by the people, for the people, and that we are the people, and it is up to us. And so that's the first thing. It's not local politics, it's local representation, and to solve local problems. The other thing is that I always suggest that people start small, because you learn the ropes and you figure out how it works. You get to know City Hall, you get to understand the sunshine laws, and they're very different from working in a corporation or on any other kind of board. It's the opposite in many ways. It has to be open, whereas if you're on a corporate board, it has to not be open in some cases. And so get involved with the Planning Commission, get involved with the Parks and Rec, or whatever commissions, the architectural, whatever commissions your community has. Start there, and then you can run for city council when you know what you're doing. And after that, you can go up the line if you want. But I think the reason it's so good for realtors is because it's very good to know what's going on in your community. If you're working with people who are buying in the community, they want to know and they appreciate it a great deal. And the other thing, I really love having realtors involved or business people, because often they understand contracts, and basically resolutions and ordinances are contracts. So if you're familiar with reading and interpreting contracts, it will come more easily. The other thing is often they'll be able to read a profit and loss sheet, or at least they'll understand cash flow. And I think that's really critical. So they have some unique abilities. And then finally, the thing that I found most helpful, although I do have a communications degree, was the ability to negotiate win-win solutions. And realtors know how to do that. And that's really what we're doing. We're not politically polarizing. We're negotiating win-win situations for both parties.
I think that's fascinating. I haven't thought about it in years, but in my opinion, you are so right about local politics. Really have so much to do with how do we create that win-win? How do we solve a real problem? And it's not as divided as, oh, I'm with this party or I'm with that party, or it's a very different, and it's not so much about, the lobbying groups or the big funding factions, shall I call them, or such. And it's so funny. One other weird thing I realized you and I have in common is I actually, which I didn't mention, I was elected student body president of my university. And It was so funny. I was the first ever elected woman to my university as a student body president. And it was so funny because it never even occurred to me that it was an area that was dominated by, males always being elected. There never, all the years of my whole university, had never had a woman elected before. There was one impeachment where there was a vice president who was a woman who took over for a few months, but never had been elected woman before. And it was interesting. So I spent a year with it, just a crazy, wonderful budget, but also realizing again, how much things can go wrong if you're not paying attention and if you don't have watchdogs and you don't realize that if we want a better world, we have to participate. We have to take responsibility.
Absolutely. And that's how it was set up. And that's how it was envisioned by our forefathers. And and for me, and I never thought too much about it, but when you go back and you look at what their intent was, I get goosebumps. I get goosebumps now talking about it. It's very idealistic. And it means we all do have to participate, because it's things locally, it's things like your trash and your sewer and your water and what they're going to cost you. And very often access to medical care, medical facilities. And it's things that affect us every single day, far more than national politics.
And you're right, because as real estate agents, we are the ones that so often are explaining, oh, well, you know what, in this area, you can't do short-term rentals, or, oh, in this area, you're having to pay 3 times as in that area for water. And they're like, what? Yeah. Or for trash. Oh, what? Oh, there's mismanagement over the city government. But if you're in the county, it's so much better. Or you're having to explain it away, because again, if you want to be a good real estate agent, you need to understand those kind of differences, or why are the utility costs, or why people are asking you about schools in different areas. So you said something earlier that I think I wanted to highlight too, is as a real estate agent or as a regular homeowner, how can you be involved? And you talked about the local boards. Well, so if it's maybe the school board, if it's an elected school board and you have children, get involved in the school board first. Maybe that's the thing. So find the thing that you're passionate about. I mean, I know people who are super passionate about environmental. So if it's about protecting the fishing and the wildlife, then get involved with that. Whatever it is that you're passionate about, get involved in that, because you will also be the person who can probably help the most, because you're knowledgeable and you can help spread that knowledge out to other people. And there are a lot of times where I found elected officials on the local level, at least, who had really good hearts, but they didn't have all the information. Yeah.
That's true. And part of it is because often in small towns, especially, we're volunteers. We're paid a very small amount. And so it's hard to work full time, have your family, and be able to review everything. But it's critical. And you're right. We really do need everybody else paying attention too, because we do miss things. And I think the whole idea of advocacy is great and extremely important. And not everybody can be a council member or should be, but what everybody can do is find the place that they use their gifts. That's how you participate. You use your gifts and donate them to the community so that you can serve it better, both as a realtor and as a citizen.
Including if your gift is somebody who researches and you have the data, then provide the data to the elected officials so that they have that information. Because I know that even as I only did 1 year as student body president, but I remember that there were nights I would lay awake going, well, what about that? And what about this? And how in the world are you supposed to know all this for 1 year? I'm still working full-time at a law firm. I was waiting tables at night. And then I was student body president with all of these responsibilities. And then I had a full-time class load. And I remember thinking, how does anybody do this? And be able to be competent and make the right decisions for people. We all have to pitch in. We all have to.
Yeah. And you're right. The research is really critical. And people often think, well, I voted and that's my responsibility and I did it, or I campaigned for my favorite person, or I marched. The reality is those things do matter. But what matters more than that is go to those meetings when they occur, read the agenda packets, ask the questions, get up, speak your piece, because there's no way your elected people can know what it's like on your street, in your town, from your eyes, unless you tell them. So they can't possibly legislate on your behalf and represent you if you don't represent yourself.
Exactly. And, there's like that old saying of what the Native Americans used to say about, unless you walked a mile in someone else's moccasins, how do you know what that life is like and that viewpoint is like? So nobody can know. You have to share it. So I also know that you did a book. Do you want to talk a little bit about your book?
Well, I did. I wrote a book, you can see it behind me, called The Happiest Corruption, Sleaze, Lies, and Suicide in a California Beach Town. I know, and it is a lot of people crack up when they see it. And that was my intention. It's the story of the corruption I found, and it's about half of what I found. And since I've written the book, I've got about a third more. But you can get it on Amazon, and you can link to anything you need to know about it. And as well as I have a podcast also called Corruption Chronicles. And you can link to all of those from my website, which is Debbie, Debbie, Peterson, Peterson.com, debbiepeterson.com. And it's all there. Or just go to Amazon or Barnes and Noble online and type in happiest corruption and it will come up. It's been selling really, really well. And I did, I went for the sleaze side of it because there's plenty of it, but that gets people's attention. And the real story is, this is what happens when you don't pay attention. Yeah. And so hopefully that message will come across.
Yeah. I don't know if I can remember that full quote, but the quote of when bad things happen, when good people do nothing.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
I think so often, we end up trying to individuate and try to, be respectful of others. But it was so funny this weekend. I just went out and I was introducing myself to some of my neighbors because I realized I don't know a lot of my neighbors. And so I made everybody little mini key lime pies because I'm from Key West. Oh. And it was so funny. They were looking at me like, huh. And it was so funny because some people were like, hi, they were super receptive. And then other people were very, very suspicious. And I was so funny. I'm like, I don't want anything. I'm not selling anything. I just wanted to actually know some of my neighbors. So I'm not running for office. I just wanted to say hi because I think it's really important to know your neighbors. So
it is. Yeah. Yeah. And how do you serve them if you don't know them? But it's also the whole neighborhood watch thing is wonderful for building community. And it just that's a huge part of happiness. There was a big happiness study, and the biggest part of happiness actually is low corruption in government.
Wow.
And community connection as well.
Wow. That's awesome. Well, as you know, we're just out of time. So I want to make sure I wrap this up. But as you know, I love to end with a yay. So will you lift your voice and say yay with me?
Oh, yeah. And my hands.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Yay! Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Jack Canfield. You may know me as the co-author of the Chicken Soup